10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Look, up in the sky, it's a bird.
It's a plane!
There's no need to fear.
I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm blacker than black, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm blacker than black, cause I'm black.
Hey everybody! Welcome back to Super Black, an all-black panel podcasting experience where we talk about all things superhero, past, present, and future. From Marvel and DC to anime, there is no stone we will leave unturned as we take a deep dive into the genre of superpowered individuals and the worlds they inhabit. I am your friendly neighborhood host, Zuri Washington. I use she, her pronouns, and you can follow me on IG at Zuri with a fringe on top. That's Zuri with a Z, not Suri with an S. I'll leave it to the rest of today's super panel to introduce themselves. Take it away.
Hey everybody, my name is Jason Williams. You can find me on Instagram at Blue83.
Hey, my name is Karen Scott. I don't know why I did that intro like that. You can find me, pronouns, she, her. You can find me on Instagram at I am Karen Scott, 1 R, 2 N's, and an E.
Hi everybody, Omar here. You can find me on Twitter at Copyright and on IG at original_gamester. Looking to have fun.
Don't forget to follow the podcast on IG at Super Black Podcast, or you can follow us on Twitter at Super Podcast. Now that we are all assembled, let's get started. So today we're going to talk worst villains, top 5 worst villains. And I'll leave it to us to decide what that means, but I don't think we're talking portrayals of villains, such as Halle Berry in Catwoman. Like, is that it comes to mind? But yeah, I think we're talking like just from conception, it's just was a bad idea, and I don't know why they ever did it. For example, I know. In my research, Codpiece was a popular top worst villain, yes. Which was very fascinating to read about, and just I don't know who thought that was a good idea. A lot of these bad villains I'm finding were prior to definitely prior to 1975. Usually they were introduced because they have like weird names or just really basic dumb names that someone just like came up with either in a fever dream or they have no imagination whatsoever. So I don't know what y'all think, but
I mean, when I was looking through stuff, it's so interesting because what was it that came out last year? The Falcon Winter Soldier series came out last year, and one that popped up a couple times when I was looking was Flag Smasher.
Oh, right.
Was a solo villain instead of the group that it is in the TV series.
Right.
But like in theory, it's a good idea. In practice, not so much. It's like he doesn't have an allegiance to anyone but himself. And I'm like, well, yeah, but that's Deadpool also. So how Deadpool works for whoever's gonna pay him the most.
Right, he's a mercenary.
Exactly. He's I'm trying to think of a way to say this.
Say it the wrong way and then say it the right way.
Okay. He doesn't have a side. You know what I mean? He has his own side. So for me, being the idea of Flag Smasher being a villain, and maybe I just need to find some of the comics with him and read them, but even in the series, they turned it into a terrorist threat. You know what I mean?
I think Flag Smasher's always a terrorist. I think that's a constant in his like origin, because Captain America, in representing like the US and the US government, the opposite of that is a terrorist.
Exactly.
Terrorist. But I do what I liked about the rehashing of what Flag Smasher was, it's a group as opposed to like a terrorist group. Like as opposed to a singular human person going against Captain America, like toe for toe situation. So I thought that made more sense in the reinvention of it all. But yeah, I did see Flag Smasher on there a couple times, which I thought was interesting, especially given the other villains that I have found that are far worse in the grand scheme of things.
I mean, they
Egghead.
Go ahead, sorry.
Like Egghead or Egg Foo, just the racist ones alone. Just like you could fill a list just full of those. There was also I'm also really fascinated. I think it's going to be really funny, but the Harley Quinn show is doing their spinoff in that supervillain bar. That they had in season 1. So you're going to see a bunch of like probably really dumb supervillains. And of course we have Kite Man. Kite Man has made a couple lists as like one of the worst. I think he's really entertaining for a lot of people, but I don't know if that takes him out of not being a good supervillain overall.
Like, is he a villain? In this iteration, I mean, like in Harley Quinn's iteration.
Technically, yes. He is still a villain. He's not like in the grand scheme of like he considers himself a villain. His parents tell him you're a terrible, like they tell him he's a bad at his job, but like that's what he's meant to be, even if he does not necessarily succeed at it. His kite-based related crimes are not like
the most well thought out,
right? And he considers he and Ivy like a power couple, like they're a super villain power couple in that context. Which is crazy because she's Poison Ivy and he's Kite Man. But that's where the comedy was. So listen, I was for it. Oh yeah, Omar.
I'm just trying to think like, so the worst villains. I typically, I guess I avoided the worst villains in a lot of my traditional comic book reading, right? So I did, because I'm like, if they were the worst villains, then the comic really wasn't that entertaining. So,
right.
So you moved on. Yeah.
But yeah. So I mean, yeah, I've seen some bad ones. I'm also trying to go off of memory. But you got to give me a little bit because it's going to flow back to me. It'll flow.
You know who's not a good villain, and it's only because of in a lot of my opinions about worst villain are based on reiterations of characters, but the Mandarin in Iron Man 3, what a fucking letdown.
Right.
Well,
like
did you?
No,
did you see the one shot?
Yeah, so good.
It didn't redeem the Mandarin character because that was all supposed to be tied into Shang-Chi, but it did kind of it helped, right? It helped at the end because it made it funny, it made it relevant. You saw the tie-in with the Mandarin. I mean, with Shang-Chi, but it was. I think the one shot was better than his whole portrayal throughout Iron Man 3. I think
100%.
So. Yeah.
And I think I'm not sure. I'm not sure if the intention was to I'm not sure what the intention was with that. You know what I mean? Like, because that one shot came out years ago. Like
with Iron Man 3, probably on the DVD or Blu-ray.
On the DVD, I think. And so it came out literal years ago. It's not like they were like, oh, we're doing Shang-Chi, so let's like make this thing. And it came out like 2 years ago. This came out years and years and years ago.
Right.
So I might have still been in high school or at least early college. That's how long ago it feels. And so I find it fascinating that this seems to have been their intent. Like that was just their intent. They were like, this is a false idol. This is not supposed to be who we say it is. And I didn't hate Iron Man 3. It takes a lot for me to hate any of these movies, like truly hate. I find redeeming qualities in almost all of them, and I've always been a strong Age of Ultron supporter. And I think that the original Mandarin as done in the MCU is disappointing because we know what he's actually supposed to like.
what he could be.
What he could be, the 10 rings and all the yada, 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 all this stuff that they end up addressing later on. But yeah, 100%. I think that,
I think I think they decided to change that up for the MCU because it's insensitive, right? That's why they made fun of what the Mandarin was in Shang-Chi. So they didn't want somebody named the Mandarin to be the star, to what puts the Asian culture on the map in the MCU. Right. So yeah.
I think at the time that it came out, though, that because that is always a factor, right? Like when people were probably like, wait, he's not, which mind you, Sir Ben Kingsley is very much of South Asian descent, but most people do not know that, or if you don't know that, it's just because you're not researching enough. But like he played Gandhi for a reason, and but there are a lot of people who were like, there's no Asian representation, and this is supposed to be an Asian character. And at a time when people were looking for representation very much so, even in their villains, it was just frustrating, I think, for a lot of people at the time. But to your point, I think that Kevin Feige and whomever else was involved in making that decision, they were like, let's not lean into this. And then they kind of went too far with that in Doctor Strange as it pertained to the Ancient One. They were like, oh, let's just completely remake the Ancient One. And even though it's very clearly Tibetan based coded characters and blah, 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 they were like, oh, let's make her like Celtic. Okay, no one asked you to do that. Okay. But I think that they've always tried to err on the side of caution or the right side of representation, and making sure the representation is both accurate and feels holistic. But sometimes they don't succeed.
Yeah, I'm not mad at the change anymore, given where they went with Shang-Chi. Even though they made it like a combined character, I'm not mad at where it went ultimately. And so
talking about the Mandarin, you mean?
The Mandarin, I'm not mad because where they steered it, it ended up someplace that was acceptable for me. Even though I would have loved, like you said, would have loved to see the Mandarin with his rings on his fingers, right? 10 rings, or even on his thumbs. It was weird. But then there's a whole backstory there. So yeah, he was terrible in Iron Man 3. But there was a little saving grace for him there. So
I mean, of course, I remember when they were advertising it, and I remember the trailer with the voice, and I remember thinking,
right?
I'm so excited. Yes, Nebula, hello. And I think I got super hyped for Ben Kingsley as the Mandarin, and then I felt let down and like this sense of disappointment because it felt like such a, what's the word? It felt at the time for me, I was like, this entire movie is lazy. And so making Ben Kingsley Trevor and making the Mandarin actually just be an actor named Trevor is lazy writing. I do not like Iron Man 3. I have many opinions about Iron Man 3.
I'm with you. I dislike it, but again, like Zuri, I don't hate it. Right? It was kind of hard to follow Iron Man 1. So Iron Man 2 was a down from there, and then Iron Man 3 was a down from that. So
I mean, speaking of the villains, it's just like the Iron Man villains have never, at least in the movies, have been kind of weak. Like Robert Downey Jr. carries these movies. Like there's for like the first movie's great. It is a good movie, but I challenge most people to remember the villains. I remember the actors more than I remember like the actual like villains. Like I love like I know Obadiah's in the first one, but like but other than that, I'm just like, who? The one with the electricity?
The whips. He's but the Crimson Dynamo. He's supposed to be such a much bigger character, but Marvel does sometimes. I guess they kill off their villains because there's so many stories to tell, and you can't retell like you can in comic books. So
I think they're doing a better job of that recently. Of not just like straight up I think the TV series allow us to get that time
Yeah.
with those villains that a movie
Mhm.
cannot, because I always imagine the movie is a 40 issue comic like, or a 20
Yeah.
to 40 issue comic,
Yeah.
but people feel when you're watching it, you're like, but this is just one, why'd you kill
Yeah.
off the villain after just one? But I'm like, that's 20 to 40 issues.
Right.
That's
Right.
like a year of comics that
Yeah.
that we're seeing put on screen. So I kind of am forgiving in that way, that I know a lot of people might not be, in the
It's like
storytelling of it.
it's
One
like
of the
they adapt books into movies. There's a lot that you're gonna lose. Yeah.
one of the first I was happy to see them not kill off the villain. Especially, it made me really happy they steered away from doing it so much. Was Vulture in the first Spider-Man, especially since it was Michael Keaton. You know, I
Yeah.
definitely want to see a repeat of his character. So
Well,
yeah.
that's the other thing. When they get these Marvel gets phenomenal actors to do these things. So when you get these phenomenal actors, the likelihood of them dying is not happening. Or it happens with less frequency, because you're not
Yeah.
going to kill off Michael Keaton in one movie.
Ugh.
Why would you do that? Are you an
Right.
idiot? But like, so it is smart of them. You know, Josh Brolin is a wonderful actor, so we got Thanos as long as we could have him.
And now he's going to be Cable again, maybe in Deadpool. aren't they
Sure,
doing that?
right, exactly. Bring him back. And I mean, it's always, they already addressed it in Deadpool 2 before Deadpool actually joined the universe, so it's just funny.
Right.
But I think that when it comes to like villains, we kind of have gotten into a place right now in this conversation talking about like villain portrayals that we enjoy, or that villains that we align with more. And I think that what makes a good villain, name is first and foremost. There's some really great names in villains, and there's some really terrible names. I saw one terrible name. It was Turner D Century. Boo. Boo. Just like
I don't even know who that is.
No, it's a character. I think I saw it was in Wonder Woman. And when do you think this was written? Tell me when you think that Turner D Century.
Turner D Century.
Yeah, tell me when you think his character was written.
Around 1998, 99.
I'm dead that you said that, because that's a lie.
Turner D Century. I mean,
No, I know, but like when I hear that, it sounds really old to me. Like when there's certain names
right.
that like what do I think? Condiment King, and like all these really dumb names that I'm like, oh, these definitely came from like this campy 50s, 60s, maybe 70s of like creation of comic book villains. And what I hate is that this character is from 1980, which feels like 1980 feels like the like really gritty time when they were like really trying to like do a lot with comic books and change perceptions of this kind of like campy versus realistic grip comic book time. And so to have a character named Turner D Century, who he doesn't have a power. He was raised by he was an adoptee of a millionaire, and he grew up learning about good culture and good manners, and he doesn't like people with bad manners. So he goes around and like has like a flamethrower umbrella, very Penguin style, and just like goes around killing or maiming people who have bad manners.
So there's no play on words with his name then, right?
Not really. It's just like maybe like I would imagine if it Turner D Century, I would imagine it's because the Turner D Century like
that's why I said 1999.
No, I would think 1900s. Like that's the kind of like.
Well, since there were no comics back then, that's why I was thinking, when was he created? 1999.
The first picture is of him on a tandem bike.
Yeah, on a bike. It's wild. It flies. It's like a flying tandem bike, and he has a that umbrella with the flamethrower thing, and I'm just like, why?
So I have a villain. He's more well known villain, very established. But I always thought he was pretty lame villain, and that's Leader from the Hulk. I never cared for Leader.
Oh, which one is that? I don't know if I know that by.
He has a big brain. He's gamma irradiated, and he's green. Has a green head. His brain. You can see it. It's like really
Is that
big.
different from the one that
He was the character. He was actually going to be created in the Hulk movie with Ed Norton. He was the guy where when he created Emil
yes.
Blonsky, and then it dripped into his head, and his head started expanding.
Yes,
that was who he was going to be.
Remember. Yep, and that's the actor that played. He was the very southern one in the Watchmen TV series. Mirror guy.
The mirror guy. Yeah. But I never.
Good, my God.
But the character, the leader, even though there's always something to be said for the brainy character versus the brawny character, right? Like in Glass, where he was, super genius, and then you got Bruce Willis, who's the strong, invulnerable hero. I get it. But the leader, as much as I like the Hulk, and I've read a lot of Hulk comics, I just never cared for the leader. And I just wanted to mention that because he's more well known. He's not one of the lesser known. Right. And he just never hit with me. I was like, this guy is so.
What was it though? What was it about him that didn't vibe with you?
I never thought he fit well as a Hulk villain, right? Because he never really crossed over into being a villain for other Marvel characters too much. Not that I can recall. So he was mainly just a Hulk. He was a Hulk mainstay. And he more or less, I guess, controlled other gamma irradiated creatures to fight the Hulk at some point or another, or he organized a lot of situations where that would cause trouble, basically, that the Hulk had to deal with. But he just never hit with me. It never sat. The Hulk is a creature for me. He's running around. He's kind of like an anti-hero. He's an accidental hero, right? So, him fighting the leader just never made sense to me. I get they're kind of opposites. One is really brawny and just a savage with dim wit, and one is really scrawny with a big brain. But that's kind of campy for me, right? That's kind of like 70s. It just didn't fit for when I really was in my prime reading comic books, And that was in my prime reading comic books was definitely in the 90s. Definitely in the 90s. It just didn't sit well. It's not anything he did per se. It just didn't really grab me. He never really interested me. I always enjoyed seeing the Hulk fight, and he couldn't fight the leader, and it was just boring to me.
What were you gonna say, Jason?
Omar, you brought up somebody. And I'm glad that you said his name because I've always hated this villain, Mr. Glass. I cannot stand Mr. Glass. It's like, you brittle, your power. I can't. You just cause disasters. I have never understood Mr. Glass. I don't get it. I've never gotten it. And I was just like, and I know we're not talking about portrayals, but damn, that wig, the power, it frustrated me that this brittle man he's like a super villain.
I think the wig, I think Samuel Jackson and Jamie Foxx shared some tips on wigs when they chose their villain.
Wig, I can't.
Truly, Frederick Douglass. That is what I think of.
Giving full abolitionist, I can't. It's too much. I cannot.
Wow.
I'm so glad. As soon as you said Mr. Glass, I was like, ooh. That one.
Yeah. The only thing I can't say I don't dislike Mr. Glass as much as I dislike the leader, and probably not as much as you dislike Mr. Glass. And I guess that's only because when they talked about when he gave his backstory, right? And he talked about he was bitter from being so brittle.
Right.
He became angry, right? And his explanation for believing that there must be heroes in the world, people with powers, because because he was in the comic books and thinking about like the opposite end of the spectrum of him. If there could be somebody like him, then there could be somebody on the other side, and him being like teased and kind of like he just was so angry that he just like, you know what, my life is bad, and so I don't care, I'm just gonna kill people and find this other people and do whatever I can. So I understood what could make him be that way, but I understand what you're saying, because
right. Yeah, like as a whole, like
when he fell down the stairs, I laughed. I'm not gonna lie, I laughed.
Same.
He was like, his bones just started breaking. I was like, wow.
There's no fight here. There's no fight there. There really isn't. Like, you're not starting a battle. You're not fighting anybody. You're behind the scenes. I don't know. I've always had an issue with Mr. Glass. And then I was gonna say, because I've been listening to the conversation as I was walking home, I've never been a fan of the portrayal of how they presented us with the Scarecrow in the Christopher Nolan Batman movies. Was it Christopher Nolan?
Yes.
It was Nolan.
It was the first one.
It was the first one. And he was briefly in the second one.
Very briefly. Like, he escaped from Arkham? Somewhere. He escaped from somewhere.
I never liked that portrayal. I didn't know how they were gonna do it anyway, and how they were gonna show the Scarecrow. But I don't know. I guess he just felt really like he got fucked up by Rachel Dawes. Like, she put a taser in the face. Like, what are we doing?
What are we doing? Wait, pause really quickly. Jason, what are you on right now? Are you on what is it? Google Chrome, or are you on
Oh, I'm on Safari. Should I be on Google?
Try Google Chrome, because I get weird audio sometimes.
Okay.
When
I'm
it's
gonna
together.
leave and come back.
Yeah. Thank you. But yeah, I guess we can talk portrayals, because sometimes a portrayal is what sticks with us.
So
in
Catwoman
popular
is
culture.
up for it?
Well, we'll discuss it. I don't know if it'll end up being in our final thing, because otherwise we could talk about portrayals all day.
God.
But I know that we wouldn't think of the Joker today without Mark Hamill's portrayal.
Right.
Like, it's very hard to separate anything that has come after from his performance, or even Kevin Conroy. Almost a lot of what happened in the animated series, it's very hard to separate from what came after. So I think that portrayals can be important, but like Poison Ivy, I guess Poison Ivy has just been pretty consistent overall, but I think that what makes a good villain to me is that they have a very strong point of view.
Right.
They have a very strong point of view. They know what they're going after. And even if it's just mayhem and chaos, like the Joker, it's just like, cool. And also to like get on Batman's nerves. That's just like, seems to be the other thing. Jason's back.
I'm on Chrome.
Yeah. Google Chrome, please sponsor us.
Sounds good.
But I think that it seems that a lot of these really bad villains or bad portrayals, like Halle Berry's Catwoman, I think is bad because what's her purpose?
Exactly.
What's her purpose? To walk and look sexy? Nailed it.
Ugh.
Nailed it. But like, what else? Like, if she had no one to go against, that's why I hate it. Like, I'm sorry, I keep talking about Gotham, and I love Ian Quinlan. I love you so much, but this is why I hated Gotham, and because I don't think that the villains can possibly have a strong point of view without a Batman there. Or the equivalent thereof, because Jim Gordon is not strong enough for me to be like, oh yeah, he's Batman in this scenario.
Well, see, that's the issue, right? Because it would seem like, and what movie was that? Where villains rise because of the Marvel movies, villains come about largely in part because a hero is there to take down regular everyday thugs.
Right.
So villains, therefore, and that's what who was that? Vision. He's the one who said that, right?
Yes.
And I think it was the movie that you love, the Avengers, Age of Ultron. Yeah, I think that was the movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that that always bothered me in Gotham. It always bothered me how these villains were prevalent in way before he was even 18 years old.
Before he was 15. I swear
Yeah.
he started didn't he start at like 12? Which, by the way,
Yeah.
David Mazouz, great actor. Love that kid. He was great, but I was so sad for his placement in a universe that didn't need him yet.
And one way or another, they were supervillains, right? Because supervillains aren't necessarily people with powers, just like Batman is a superhero.
Right.
So they were supervillains before there was anything like a superhero.
Yep.
So they
just the
kind of inverted it.
GCPD.
Right.
As if the GCPD could do anything against supervillains like Hugo Strange and like what? I love BD Wong, but like get out of here.
And I think that's why for Joker, for the movie Joker, with Joaquin Phoenix, I think that was acceptable to me, even though there was no Batman, because it was unexpected. Crime was, it reminded me of just old New York, but just crazier. Just crazier. And
like
you could kind of
pre-Disney New York.
Yeah, you could kind of see how it could actually happen. In Gotham, you can't really feel a connection to how something like that might spark off, right? And then that was some good storytelling in Joker movie. So
yeah, really good storytelling
about the Joker movie. Because you said
say that one more time.
What was unexpected about the Joker movie? Because you said
no, not unexpected. I mean, I said you could see how it could come about. Like there was no hero before the Joker was, right? So for instance, Joker is a supervillain, but he wasn't a supervillain. He was a regular person, and he was going through all these issues, and you could see how he had an effect, especially once what happened at the end when he was on TV and with Robert De Niro. So all that. But Gotham is what made no sense. Even though I watched all of it, it made no sense from that perspective. I'm like, why are these heroes these villains all over the place? Like they were literally they had Firefly. Like, come on, man. It's
okay,
crazy.
but I'm very good friends. I love Michelle Ventimiglia.
No, not that. No, I'm just talking about the fact that
it's never the portrayals.
Right.
Not the portrayals in Gotham were fine.
They were super villains, like literal super villains, and no heroes at all. So it's like weird.
I felt so bad when Ian was on and everyone was like bragging on him, but they'd be like something, but Gotham.
Right.
Listen,
we're not.
I just have to call a spade, and Gotham was not a good show from the perspective of a comic book fan. It just didn't make sense. It made all the villains. Like, just make a series about villains if you want to, but don't call it Gotham and be like, it's a police procedural. What are the police doing? It's just Jim Gordon and for some reason Leslie making out for no reason. I don't know. It was just all over the place.
A series about villains is great. I mean, like there's a precedent, right, with like Wanted, the movie, and in John Wick. You know what I'm saying? Where there's no heroes in those, but all these assassins and Wanted, they had actual abilities. So, I mean, they could do that. But like you said, tacking Gotham onto it, and with this young Bruce Wayne, it's very strange.
Yeah. I think some of the other, I think I'm trying to like branch out into other anime. Always have really weird villains, and that could be a thing unto itself. But Sailor Moon has some pretty weird villains because, again, in the context of Sailor Moon, I wish I had Sheridan here with me. But in the context of Sailor Moon, usually it's a normal ass person who is like so mad. They're like, but I want to be the best violin player, and like. And then because the like Queen Beryl or whomever gives them like something with like an evil dark aura or dark crystal of some kind, it transforms them into a villain. Wild. What a crazy time. Anime are crazy. But I think that's also anime's like in a whole different category of camp.
Yes.
That American comic books haven't tried to do for many years in the same way. I would say that a lot of what we watch in Japanese animation is based off of like those old comic books, and they're like, oh, but on a more supernatural, weird level. Because what else does anyone in Japan have to do except like think of the weirdest thing that they could possibly put onto paper, pen to paper. And I say this as a huge, like a big anime and manga fan. Like I used to have a really big collection of manga. But yeah, I think that when it comes to Western comic books, I think that villains are, they're one or the other. It's very rare that there's just like middle of the road villains, because they're either like really bad and then they disappear, or they're pretty good to good and you bring the pretty good ones back like every once in a while, or they're in the background, but the good ones, they keep going back to them because there's something about them. What is it that attracts you guys to a villain, so to speak?
I think Omar said it earlier, like having, or maybe Zuri, you said this, but having a good backstory, like having a good why, right? When you can kind of identify with a villain, even though you don't necessarily agree with them, like in Black Panther, you know what I'm saying? Like you can identify with his name is escaping me, Michael B. Jordan's character,
Killmonger.
You can identify with why he's so angry and why he wants to fight Black Panther and why he wants to do these things, even though you're not on his side technically, you get him. And I think that being able to see parts of yourself in some of these villains and being like, oh, I could see that. I wouldn't go to that extreme, but I could see that. You know what I'm saying? I think for me, that's what makes a really good villain. Or else it's just like, why are you angry? Like, why are you so mad?
So you can't see yourself aligning with Milkman Man?
Okay. So, and while we were talking, honestly, while you guys were talking, I was looking up because I didn't realize the topic was like worst villains, like just bad. Batman has a whole list of awful named villains and things.
Just by themselves. Just Batman's rogues gallery by itself.
We don't even need to talk about that. But yeah, for me, it's seeing some of yourself and how these villains are and how they came to be. I think that's really important.
I agree with Jason, right? For the most part, I think the why is number one. Like Magneto, and we talked about it last time, right? The why is very important. And I can see myself in that. The same with Killmonger and some other villains. I can see myself the same Michael Keaton's portrayal of Vulture. You know, being guys who were basically shut off from their work and going broke, and what he had to do to make money to take care of his family. You know, so you can see yourself or the potential. Like you said, you wouldn't go to that extreme, but I think also I never saw. I love Doctor Doom, and I didn't love Doctor Doom for a long time. And the reason is because Fantastic Four. I've never liked Fantastic Four. Never cared for them at all. Just before their bad movies. They're the weakest Marvel team to me. Not weak in terms of power, but they're the corniest.
No, just they are the corniest. That's true.
And so their villains, the people associated with them by extension, didn't like Annihilus and different characters. Never really paid too much attention, except Silver Surfer. But Doctor Doom, I came to appreciate. Not really because of the why, right? I don't know Doctor Doom's full backstory, but the sheer will and determination and ingenuity. I came to really appreciate. Doctor Doom has ascended to the highest levels of power in the multiverse, right? So he's had that, and for that to be a human who was not a mutant or anything like that prior, that, I guess, the identification comes with what we as humans love to feel about ourselves or believe about ourselves, is that we are capable of anything if we put our minds to it.
Right.
And so that is why I like Dr. Doom. That's my connection with a character like that.
But
Especially from
sorry, go ahead.
just especially from an American frame of mind, in like, oh, boots to the ground, you can do whatever you want as long as you work hard and you do ba 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 ba. And I find that most characters in comic books speak to those ideals, whether they are supervillains or superheroes. What were you going to say, Corinne?
I was going to say on the other hand, the Joker is arguably one of the most famous villains of all time. How do I don't relate to the Joker? You know what I mean?
But you don't. You say you don't.
But thinking about like just chaos for chaos sake.
But he is chaos for chaos sake. But it's still. I mean, it depends on what comic you read, but sometimes it's a matter of, I mean, we've talked about Joaquin Phoenix's portrayal of the Joker, like society failed him.
Right.
If you can't understand that, then you're a rich megalomaniac billionaire. Like, that's the only people that could not understand that point of view. But just generally speaking of different portrayals or different writings of the Joker, it's that...
Because we don't know his backstory.
We know, but there are multiple backstories.
That's the thing, yeah.
You say we don't know his backstory. Originally, no, but in the years since, like especially since the 80s, they've tried to rewrite and figure out what his backstory is multiple times. And there are really popular iterations of what that backstory is. Obviously, the Killing Joke comes to mind.
I think,
but yeah.
No, I was going to say, like the Joker, I identify with the Joker only in that, like, the Joker to me as a character it would seem like he's all chaos, no order, but I don't see it that way.
I agree.
I see him, he's very chaotic, but there's always reasons behind it. Joker is always trying to pull the worst out of society. He's trying to prove a point. And he goes about doing what he's doing in order to prove that point. Whether it be, in Injustice, not the bad comic book, the bad anime, but just overall, what he did there, just in his whole history, he's trying to prove a point. He's bringing the worst out of Batman. He's trying to prove to Batman that they're yin and yang.
He brought the worst out of Harley.
Yeah, yeah.
Like he's really good at that. Like he's a master of finding your insecurity or finding the thing that you hate most about yourself and pulling that to the fore and using it against you.
Yeah. And he's not fearful. He does all of it without fear. Even when he portrays that he might be scared, he's not. It's all part of his maniacal and devious nature. So I think there's always an end to his whatever he sets in motion. He always has goals. There's an end, but there's not an end at the same time. It's like there's an end to each maybe plot point, but there's so many plot points, so many different things he's willing to do to get those results. Yeah. So, but yeah.
Yeah. I also think Joker comes from a place where and I know there have been times I felt this way, especially beginning of the pandemic, where it's like, what's the point? This isn't real. This is all this stuff is fake. Everybody trying to be like these one thing, that the world is not that. You know what I'm saying? The world is not all, if you do right, everything will be okay. It's not that. And him constantly trying to prove that and constantly trying to get people basically in his state of mind. Like that part, I think I get about him. And I see, like, he's obviously, he's maniacal, but like, I see those parts of him. And that part I get. And it's just like trying to basically, and almost like tear down the system, and reveal people for who they are, who he believes everyone to be.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately he's trying to show that everybody else on the planet is not so different from himself.
It's not so different. Exactly. That's the entire point of The Killing Joke. That's what he was trying to do with Jim Gordon when he shot Barbara and put him in that amusement park full of pictures of her naked body and yada, 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 yada. That's what his intention was, to show that given the certain circumstances, one bad day can change someone's entire outlook on life and their entire mental aptitude and psyche. And he didn't win in that case, because the point in that story is that Jim Gordon's just a damn good cop and he's a good man. And that's not going to bring him to his knees. And then perhaps, because the thing is, if he can't get those people to see the Joker in themselves, then he's singular and then he's alone, and he doesn't want to be alone. Not in that way. Anyway, devolves into Joker talk as one usually does when you're talking about villains. But
I mean, he's
I know, but like,
he's kind of a goat.
Yeah, I mean, he's in the top 5 for sure. Without me having to think too hard about it, he's in the top 5, probably the top 3. Yeah. But I think that for me, the worst villains, they kind of, I'm trying to think of one franchise or one comic book house has like the most worst villains versus the other, or like I don't know. It might be, it's probably pretty even because they all have pretty terrible.
They got some pretty bad ones, but like I feel like because Batman is like a man, I feel like he has the worst.
Yes.
Like I feel like Batman has like the worst.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
The most lame villains. Like I think he probably
Condiment Man.
Condiment. He is a king. Put some respect on his name.
Put some respect on it.
Put some respect on Condiment King's name. It's an entire episode of Batman the Animated Series where all these normal ass people get hypnotized by, I can't remember the actual plot of the episode, but they get hypnotized. They're all comedians. I think it's by the Joker. But he hates other comedians so much that he hypnotized them into believing that they were supervillains. And so they all took on the supervillain, like the worst supervillains in the franchise, as monikers. Condiment King was one of them. It was really, really funny episode. But they were all like, as soon as Batman would be able to get the hypnosis off of them, they'd be like, how did I get here? I was just on stage. What? Like, I thought I was giving a set and I don't know what happened. But yeah, anyway. But I mean, Condiment King is in my top 5 of worst villains just because, like, what? Mayonnaise?
Yes.
Ketchup, mustard? Why? Crazy. At least Kite Man can fly around. I don't know what Condiment King, I think he can use his condiments as like a jetpack kind of thing. Like
hot sauce.
That's
like
so
hot sauce in your eye.
Sure, hot sauce sucks. That's true. But for the most part, I don't think I've ever seen him use that. I'm sure he does in the comic books at some point, but like I've never seen it in any TV series I've seen. But there's also Codpiece is up there for me, because like why does he have his junk is literally a cannon, and why, for what reason? Like, and it's not, and I don't think it's that, like, it's not like a I think it's something he attaches to himself. It's not like it's a replacement for a body part he's missing theoretically, but I don't know. But
it made me think of Goldmember.
Right. It's very Goldmember. It's very in that vein. But I am like, which came first? Probably Codpiece. But yeah.
Cod? Wait. So
Codpiece.
What is the cod for?
Codpiece. Like, have you ever heard, like, it's a very, in my brain anyway, codpiece is like a very British term.
Yes.
Right? I honestly,
during like the 80s, the guys would wear them over their jeans to feel like rock and roll.
Yeah, I feel like Michael Jackson would wear cod pieces in the 80s. Like,
I didn't know that was a thing. I mean, I'm sure I know.
The most famous cod piece in history is David Bowie in the Labyrinth.
Sure.
Okay, Labyrinth. I've seen that movie. I never knew what cod pieces were. Not to say that I've never seen them. I just never knew that they're, associated a name with what I saw.
Yeah, it's existed for like 500 years plus, probably.
Okay.
As
Around the
a
time
just
of
a general-
Chastity Belt.
Modesty thing.
basically,
Yeah.
I would say around the same time to protect male genitals. I would say it's probably
The early what they call them again, the protector cups.
the cups. And it's like,
Yes.
Okay.
it's like no one's gonna get me here because but
Take my arm, don't take my manhood.
but there's some really some of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles villains are also
Oh yeah. Well.
bad.
Well, some of the worst villains, they have to be Power Rangers, even more than Teenage Mutant Ninja
I
Turtles.
wasn't gonna bring that up.
I was, but then I was like, is Jason gonna be mad if I bring up Power Rangers?
I was not gonna do it because there are some really bad ones.
But Ivan Ooze is amazing, so I'm not gonna leave him out.
Classic.
Classic. But there's some, there are, and I don't know if it's because of the style, like of the like the way that Power Rangers is. But yeah, there's just some not great. Maybe it's because they're kids, and they were like, okay, we have to dumb these villains like down.
Yeah.
But it's in the same vein of anime, right? Like, what? Like, why are you doing this? And what are we fighting? What are we literally doing right now? Can they just go back to class? I don't know what's
the
happening.
worst in Power Rangers was Rita called it the chunky chicken. It was a chicken who had a giant pair of scissors as a weapon.
Chunky
So
chicken.
the chicken was tired of getting clipped. The chicken was going to clip you.
I guess the chunky chicken. And I even remember as a kid being like, "This is a mess."
Everything.
The thing barely has arms.
No.
Power Rangers was funny from Bulk and Skull. The fact that their names were Bulk and Skull. Ugh, man.
There's a villain called what's her name? Cooter.
She
Cooter. And
the lead of people she's around. Yeah.
Cooter and Bash. What was her
I
code?
think it's Bash. I think you're right.
Cooter and Bash. She has a mutation where she's able to like Corinne said, amplify anyone's dishonest like nature. So I don't know how she could go up against like Superman or anybody like Spider-Man or anybody like that who's like actually like a good person, because you can't amplify what's not there. And what a weird power.
I do see how you could amplify it, right? Because they both hide their identities. So if you amplify that, there's probably ways, if you're really creative, to amplify that.
Maybe but I guess wouldn't you have to know? I don't know how her power works. Like, I'm not sure if it's like she would have to know that in order to.
Well, Spider-Man you would. Superman you might not, because you might think he's full-time Superman. But Spider-Man you definitely know there's a mask. So
right. Just so her name alone, I was like disqualified.
But yeah.
Like, I was like, what? Crazy. And there was somebody. There's 50% Chad.
What?
Literally, I think if I remember reading this correctly, he was. I don't know what he was, but he is literally 50% of a human man that was re-given life, basically a zombie. It's half his body, like his lower legs.
His
50%
is
50% Chad. It's tidy whities and socks.
Wait, that's the rendering of the villain. Is just legs.
It's 50% Chad. That's his name. And there's a League of Annoyance. We could. We don't even have time to get into the League of Annoyance, but like 50% Chad. Isn't that wild that someone was like, yes, villain. Like, what? I approve.
What would he be at 100%? Like,
I don't think it's. We don't know. His top half is gone forever. I think it was eaten by roaches or the animals over years, and he is just half a zombie and just legs.
Wow.
Wow.
Anyway, it's crazy.
That's a distant
Well, clearly we're not able to come up with a top 5 because there's too many things to talk about. Could y'all tell us what you think your top 5 is? I think it's impossible to come up with a top 5 of worst villains because they are either not known enough, so you don't have very much information about them, or they're just so bad that there's kind of like a 40-way tie.
I nominate 50% Chad and that chicken from Power Rangers with the scissors.
Oh, and the Amoeba Boys from Powerpuff Girls.
Ooh, oh, I hated them.
Gross. Talk about COVID.
Oh, and Condiment King. I mean, how could you leave him out? I mean,
No, never leave out Condiment King. He's definitely there. He's always there. Even if we have a top 5, he's there somewhere. I don't care.
that's probably more ridiculous than the chicken with the.
I don't know. The
Condiment King.
fucking
I
terrifying.
mean, come on. As Condiment King, he could literally have a job at the movie theater, like all the time. I mean, to be a villain, I mean, it's crazy.
Nightmare. Anyway, thanks for having this conversation with me, guys. Everybody at home, let us know what your thoughts on our conversation today. Let's start with...
Yes, everybody. Omar here. You can catch me on Twitter at Copyright and on IG at original_gamester. Have a good one.
And sorry about that. And my name is Jason Williams. You can catch me on IG at Blue Ranger 83 and Twitter also at Blue Ranger 83.
I'm Corinne Scott, she, her pronouns. You can find me on Instagram at I am Corinne Scott, Monar, 2 N's and an E.
And as always, I'm your friendly neighborhood host, Zuri. You can find me on IG at Zuri with a fringe on top. And don't forget, should you need heroes, we've got your back. We fear no topic we attack. If conversation is what you lack, you'll find it here with Super Black.